Captain Jackson Steele stood in the crowded hall of the alien palace, his eyes scanning the grand chamber. The walls, made of shimmering metal, reflected the soft glow of 1,000 alien lights. The air smelled strange, not like Earth at all, but he barely noticed. He had faced far worse environments during his years as a soldier, but this was different. The Queen Zerethal sat upon her high throne, a powerful figure in dark armor that made her appear even taller. She had a regal presence, but there was something cold in her eyes. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to make alliances. And she had a proposition that would change the future of her kingdom, and the future of Jackson's mission. Her voice echoed through the chamber, sharp and clear, commanding the attention of everyone present. "Warrior from Earth, I have a challenge for you," Zerethal said, her gaze fixed on Jackson. "A beast roams my lands. It has destroyed cities, slaughtered thousands, and defied all attempts to kill it. I offer you a choice. Kill the beast, and I will give you a reward beyond your imagination. The prize? My daughter's hand in marriage. The strongest warrior will secure her future, and the future of my kingdom." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. There were whispers, some laughter, and even some gasps. The Queen had made this offer before, but no one had succeeded. Jackson felt a wave of disbelief sweep over the crowd. This was no ordinary offer. Marrying a royal was a dream come true for many, but it came with a price. And the beast, the one that had terrorized the land, was not a prize to be won lightly. Jackson stood up straight, his muscles rippling beneath his combat suit. His face was hard, his expression unreadable. He had seen things no one should have to see, fought battles that had torn apart entire planets. But this was different, a chance to prove humanity's strength, not just his own. The Queen's words echoed in his mind. Kill the beast, marry the princess. It was a test, not just of his skill, but of his willpower. His reputation had preceded him. He had faced the most dangerous creatures, fought in wars that had threatened to consume entire galaxies. He wasn't afraid of monsters. He was afraid of failure. And he would not fail. "I accept," Jackson said, his voice steady, unwavering. The entire room turned silent as the words left his mouth. No hesitation, no fear, just a promise to do whatever it took. The Queen's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. She wasn't used to warriors accepting her challenge so quickly. Most hesitated, weighing the dangers. But this human, this Jackson Steele, had no doubts. Zerethal rose from her throne and looked at her daughter, Princess Alira, who stood quietly by her side. Alira had heard the same offer countless times, but this human warrior was different. There was something about him, a strength in his eyes, a fire in his heart. She couldn't help but feel drawn to him. "Prepare yourself, warrior," the Queen said. "The beast awaits." Jackson nodded, and without another word, he turned to leave the chamber. He wasn't here for glory or power. He was here for something far more important, to prove that humans were stronger than anyone ever thought possible. Jackson stood at the edge of the great hall, staring at the massive doors that led outside to the unknown. The Queen's words rang in his ears, her challenge a heavy weight on his shoulders. He had accepted the offer without hesitation, but now, the reality of what he had agreed to was beginning to settle in. He was about to face a beast that had killed countless warriors, an enemy that had never been defeated. The Queen's daughter, Princess Alira, had not spoken much during the announcement. She had stood quietly beside her mother, her expression unreadable. But now, as Jackson made his way through the palace corridors, he saw her waiting for him in the garden. The cool breeze carried the scent of strange flowers, and the sky above was a swirling mix of alien colors. Alira was beautiful, but there was something else about her, something deeper that drew Jackson in. She wasn't like the others. She wasn't here to see him as just another warrior. He could tell. She was different. "Captain Steele," she said softly as he approached. Her voice was gentle, but there was strength behind it. "Are you sure about this? The beast, It's not like anything you've ever fought. Jackson looked at her, his eyes steady. I've fought worse. Whatever this creature is, I'll handle it. Elira studied him, as though trying to understand what drove him. It's not just about strength. Many have tried to kill it, and none have returned. It has powers, powers that defy logic. Jackson nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. I don't care about logic. I care about getting the job done. She looked away, as if lost in thought. My mother doesn't care about logic either, she said quietly. She cares about power. She's always cared about power. But you don't seem like that. Jackson was taken aback. For a moment, he wasn't sure how to respond. Was this an accusation? Or was it something else? Elira continued, her voice softer now. You're not doing this for her. For my mother, I mean. You're doing it for yourself. Jackson let out a slow breath, trying to find the right words. I'm doing it for all of us, he said. For Earth. For you. For this whole kingdom. I'm not here to prove anything. But I'll finish what I started. Elira's eyes softened, and for the first time, Jackson saw a flicker of something more than just duty in her gaze. Something human. Something real. You don't know what you're up against, she warned again, her voice tinged with worry. The beast is. It's a part of the planet. It has the power of nature itself. You can't just fight it with strength. Jackson stepped closer, his voice firm. Then I'll fight it with my will. And I will win. There was a long silence between them, but something unspoken passed between them in that moment. Elira didn't say anything more, but Jackson could see that she understood. She had doubts, just like him. But they both knew that there was no turning back. I'll be ready, Jackson said, turning to leave. And I'll kill the beast. As he walked away, he felt her gaze on him, her silent support giving him more strength than any weapon could. He was ready. He had to be. For her. For the kingdom. For humanity. The journey to the beast's lair was long and treacherous. Jackson and his team of alien soldiers moved through dense forests, their path lit only by the faint glow of distant stars and the occasional flashes of strange, glowing plants along the ground. Every step was a reminder that this was no ordinary mission. It wasn't just about strength or weapons. The beast they were heading to was a force of nature, something far beyond anything they had encountered before. The team was quiet, focused on the task at hand. Jackson led the group with his usual confidence, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. He had been through dangerous missions before, but this one felt different. This wasn't just about survival. This was about proving that humanity could stand against the universe's toughest challenges. Behind him, the alien soldiers whispered among themselves. They had heard of the beast, of course. Everyone had. Legends of its power had spread across the galaxy, and many believed it was impossible to defeat. Some of them, Jackson could tell, were starting to question the wisdom of this mission. But Jackson's resolve remained unshaken. As they walked, the air grew heavier and the temperature dropped. The trees seemed to stretch higher, their thick trunks twisting like ancient hands reaching toward the sky. The ground became more uneven, the dense underbrush making each step more difficult. But Jackson barely noticed. His mind was set on one goal, killing the beast. After several hours, they reached a clearing. The trees parted, revealing a massive rock formation at the center of the area. The ground here was cracked, and the air hummed with an eerie energy. Jackson could feel it, the presence of something powerful, something alive. His instincts told him the beast was close. Stay alert, Jackson ordered. We're getting close. The team tightened ranks, weapons at the ready, as they approached the entrance to the beast's lair. It was a cave, large enough to swallow their entire group. From within, a deep growl echoed out, sending a shiver through everyone. The sound was unlike anything Jackson had ever heard, a low rumble that seemed to shake the very earth beneath them. Jackson stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew he had to be ready. The stories about the beast weren't exaggerated. It was said to be a creature of both flesh and energy, capable of regenerating any wound and harnessing the power of the planet itself. Some believed it was a guardian of the land. Others thought it was a cursed monster. Jackson didn't care about the stories. He only cared about one thing: survival. As the group moved closer to the cave's mouth, the growl grew louder, more aggressive. The air felt charged, as if the beast itself was waiting for them. Jackson could almost taste the tension in the air. He motioned for his team to spread out, taking careful steps toward the entrance. His heart pounded, but his mind was clear. This was what he had come for: to kill the beast and prove that humanity could face even the greatest of challenges. "Get ready," Jackson whispered to the team. "And don't let your guard down for a second." The moment they entered the cave, the ground trembled. A monstrous figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing like embers in the dark. It was massive, easily twice the size of any creature Jackson had ever fought. And it wasn't alone. From the walls of the cave, smaller versions of the beast began to stir, their glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. Jackson's grip tightened on his weapon, his body tensing for the fight ahead. The battle had begun. Jackson stepped forward, his eyes locked on the massive creature standing in the center of the cave. The air was thick with tension, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to pulse with a strange energy. The beast was enormous, its dark fur matted with dirt and blood from previous battles. Its eyes glowed with an eerie orange light, watching them with an intelligence that sent chills down Jackson's spine. This was no ordinary monster. It was something more. The creature let out a low growl, a sound so deep it vibrated through the walls of the cave. Its massive claws scraped against the stone, sending sparks flying in every direction. Jackson's heart raced, but he held his ground. He wasn't afraid. He was ready. The team of alien soldiers behind him took a cautious step forward, their weapons raised and ready. But Jackson could feel their fear. They had never faced anything like this before. The beast wasn't just a physical opponent. It was something else entirely. A force of nature. A living nightmare. "Stay close," Jackson whispered to his team, his voice steady. "And keep your focus. Don't let it get to you." The beast lunged without warning, moving faster than Jackson had expected. It charged straight toward him, its claws slashing through the air like lightning. Jackson ducked just in time, feeling the rush of wind as the creature's claws narrowly missed his head. The ground beneath him shook as the beast hit the stone with a powerful thud. Jackson rolled to the side, quickly regaining his footing. He drew his weapon, a sleek, high-tech blade designed for close combat. The alien soldiers fired their weapons at the beast, but the creature barely flinched. Its skin seemed to absorb the blasts, as if it was invulnerable. Jackson knew they couldn't rely on their guns. This was going to be a fight of will and skill. The beast turned toward the group, its eyes glowing brighter now, and let out a deafening roar that echoed through the cave. The sound rattled Jackson's bones, but he didn't let it break his focus. He had faced worse than this. "Move in," Jackson shouted, his voice sharp. He charged forward, his blade raised high. The beast swiped at him with its claws, but Jackson was faster. He ducked low, sliding beneath its massive paws and slashing at its underbelly. The blade cut through the creature's fur, but it didn't draw blood. Instead, a dark, glowing energy leaked from the wound, and the beast let out another roar of fury. Jackson's heart skipped a beat. The wound hadn't hurt it. It was like the beast wasn't entirely flesh at all. It was something more, something alive, but not entirely natural. He had to think fast. As the creature turned to face him, Jackson realized something. This wasn't just a battle of strength. It was a battle of strategy. He couldn't fight this thing head-on. He had to outsmart it. He had to find its weakness. The beast lunged again, this time with more precision. Jackson barely dodged the attack, but his mind was racing. There had to be a way to defeat it. He just needed to find the right moment, the right strike. The beast's eyes locked onto him, and Jackson knew it was coming for him. The others were firing again, but it wasn't working. The creature's power was too great. This was a fight he couldn't win with strength alone. He had to be clever. "Get back," Jackson shouted to his team, signaling them to retreat. They needed to give him space. He was going to take this creature down, not by force, but by using its own power against it. The battle had raged on for what felt like hours. Jackson's body was covered in sweat, his muscles sore from the constant movement. The beast was relentless, its claws slashing, its roar deafening, and its power overwhelming. Yet Jackson had refused to back down. He couldn't afford to, not when so much was on the line. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the creature stumbled, its massive body shaking as if it were on the verge of collapse. Jackson's blade had found its mark several times, each strike weakening the beast. But it wasn't enough. The creature had too much power, too much energy flowing through it. And no matter how much damage Jackson caused, it kept regenerating, like something out of a nightmare. He knew he couldn't keep up this fight forever. His team, the alien soldiers, were beginning to falter. Some were already retreating, their weapons ineffective against the creature's impenetrable skin. Jackson glanced at them, but he didn't have time to worry about anyone but himself right now. He was the one who had accepted the challenge. He was the one who had promised to kill the beast. With a sudden surge of strength, the creature lunged again, catching Jackson off guard. He barely managed to raise his weapon in time to block the beast's claw, but the force sent him flying backward. He slammed against the cave wall, the impact knocking the wind out of him. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he thought he might pass out. But he didn't. He couldn't. Not now. Gritting his teeth, Jackson pushed himself up, shaking off the dizziness. His hands were trembling, but he refused to let them stop him. He wasn't here to fail. He wasn't here to give up. The beast circled him, its glowing eyes locking onto him with a cold, predatory gaze. Jackson could feel it. This creature was not just fighting for survival. It was fighting to dominate. It wanted to crush him, to prove that it was the stronger force. But Jackson wouldn't let that happen. Not today. With a grunt, he charged again, faster this time, using every ounce of energy he had left. He didn't need to rely on brute strength anymore. He had learned its rhythm, understood its movements. The beast might have more power, but Jackson had something it didn't: determination. This time, when Jackson struck, he aimed for something different. Not the creature's flesh, but its core, its source of energy. As his blade pierced the beast's side, the creature let out a deafening scream, its body spasming as dark energy flowed out from the wound. The glowing light in its eyes began to flicker, then dim. Jackson didn't stop. He pressed harder, forcing his blade deeper into the wound. The energy began to surge back into the cave, vibrating through the ground. The walls shook, and the air grew thick with power. The beast was weakening, and Jackson could feel it. This was it, his moment. With one final push, he drove the blade deep into the creature's core. The beast's body convulsed violently before collapsing to the ground with a final earth-shattering roar. Silence fell over the cave. Jackson staggered back, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. The beast was dead, but the victory felt hollow. He looked down at his bloodied hands, the weight of the fight still pressing on his shoulders. The team slowly approached, their eyes wide in disbelief. They had witnessed the impossible. Jackson had done what no one else could. He had killed the beast. But there was no time to celebrate. Jackson could feel his strength slipping away. He was injured, exhausted, and the battle had taken more from him than he had expected. As the soldiers gathered around, Jackson collapsed to his knees, the world spinning around him. Alira's face appeared at the entrance of the cave. She rushed toward him, her eyes filled with concern. "Jackson," she called out, but Jackson's vision was fading. He could barely keep his eyes open. The fight was over. But the real challenge had just begun. The cave was silent, save for the distant echoes of the beast's final roar. Jackson lay on the cold stone floor, his breath shallow, his body a mix of bruises and cuts. His vision was blurry, but he could hear the faint footsteps of the alien soldiers approaching. His hand was still clutching the hilt of his blade, but the weight of it felt heavy, almost too much to bear. He had won. He had killed the beast, but the price had been steep. A few of the soldiers helped him to his feet, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something no one had thought possible. But Jackson didn't feel like a hero. He felt drained, as though every part of him had been emptied during the battle. As he was guided out of the cave, the cold air hit him, sharp and biting, but it did little to wake him from his foggy state. His body screamed in protest with every step. He had never been in a fight like this before, where victory came at such a cost. When they finally emerged into the open, the sight of the alien landscape barely registered in Jackson's mind. The sky was a strange shade of purple, with 2 moons hanging low on the horizon, but Jackson barely noticed. His thoughts were clouded by exhaustion, his body heavy with fatigue. He was more than just physically hurt. He was mentally drained, unsure of what was next. He was ready to face the Queen, to fulfill his end of the bargain. But a part of him wasn't sure what he was stepping into. The Queen, Zerethal, had made a promise that, at the time, had seemed like a clear path forward. Kill the beast, marry her daughter, and secure his place in history. But now, standing on the edge of this strange world, Jackson wondered if that promise was enough to justify everything he had done. As they made their way toward the palace, Jackson's thoughts drifted to Princess Alara. She had been by his side during the journey, her quiet strength a steady presence amidst the chaos. He had sensed something more in her, something that went beyond her royal status. She wasn't like her mother. She didn't view the world through the lens of power and politics. There was kindness in her, a vulnerability that spoke to him in ways he hadn't expected. But now that the battle was over, he wasn't sure where that left them. Was she truly free to choose her path, or had her future already been decided for her by her mother's actions? As Jackson entered the grand hall of the palace, the Queen was waiting for him. Standing tall and regal on her throne, her face was unreadable, as always, but there was something in her eyes now, a flicker of respect. She had promised him the reward, but Jackson knew it was more than that. She wasn't just giving him her daughter's hand. She was offering her future, and Alira's choice wasn't really hers to make. Zerethal's voice broke the silence. You have done what no one else could. The beast is dead, and my kingdom is safe. But now you must fulfill your part of the bargain. Jackson stood tall, despite the pain that still shot through his body. I've done what you asked. Now, what's next? Zerethal's gaze hardened slightly. Next, you will marry my daughter. But understand this, warrior, this is not just a political move. It is a union of strength, and it will solidify your place here, in this kingdom. Jackson's heart skipped a beat. He had expected the Queen's words to be cold, but they felt heavier than he had imagined. This wasn't just about a marriage. It was about power, about control. And as he looked up at her, he realized that the choice Alira had in all of this was far from clear. Jackson stood before the Queen, her words still echoing in his ears. He had done what no one thought was possible. He had killed the beast. The kingdom was safe, and yet the weight of his victory felt heavy on his shoulders. Zerethal's eyes were cold, her words as sharp as ever. She had promised him the reward, but it didn't feel like a reward at all. Alira had been quiet during the entire exchange, standing beside her mother. She had not spoken a word since they returned from the cave, and Jackson couldn't help but feel the tension between them. He had won the challenge, but the cost was clear. The Queen's offer had never been about love or freedom. It was about power, about securing her daughter's future and maintaining control over her kingdom. And now, Jackson was expected to marry Alira, a woman he barely knew, because of a promise made under the weight of a battle that had nearly cost him his life. The silence in the room stretched long, and Jackson knew the moment of truth had arrived. He had completed the Queen's challenge, but was that enough? Was he willing to marry Alira, knowing it was a political move, not a choice of the heart? Jackson's gaze flicked over to Alira. She stood there, her face unreadable, her eyes distant. There was a sadness in her expression, one that Jackson couldn't ignore. He had seen it before, a longing for something more than what her mother's plans allowed her. But Jackson didn't want to be part of another political game. He didn't want to be someone's pawn. Jackson. Alira's voice cut through the silence, her tone soft but steady. She stepped forward, her eyes locking with his. You don't have to do this. You don't have to marry me just because my mother says so. Jackson blinked, caught off guard by her words. He had expected her to be silent, to accept the Queen's wishes without question. But Alira was different. She had always been different. The strength in her voice surprised him. And in that moment, he saw her for who she truly was, not just a princess, but a woman with her own desires, her own choices. I know this wasn't what you expected, Jackson said, his voice low. I didn't come here for a political marriage. I came here to protect the people, to prove humanity's strength. But he hesitated, unsure of how to continue. But now I'm not sure what's right anymore. I don't want to make a decision that isn't mine to make. Alira's expression softened. This isn't just about what's right or wrong. It's about what we both want. We don't have to follow the rules my mother set. I don't want to marry someone just for the sake of power. I want to choose my future. Jackson felt a rush of relief. He hadn't expected her to say that. For the first time, he saw that Alira wasn't just a pawn in her mother's game. She was her own person, capable of making her own choices. And maybe, just maybe, he could have a say in the future too. The Queen watched them both, her face a mask of stone. She had been silent, but her presence loomed large in the room. Finally, she spoke, her voice cold but not without a hint of respect. You both have your own paths to choose, she said. But understand this, whether you marry or not, the kingdom will not change. The power I hold will remain, regardless of your choices. Jackson turned back to Alira, his heart pounding in his chest. He had come here to fight for something greater, but now, he realized, the greatest fight was for his own future and hers. I'll make my decision, Jackson said, his voice steady. But we both have to choose, not just because of what the Queen wants, but because of what we want for ourselves. Alira smiled softly, the first real smile Jackson had seen from her. Then let's make it together. The tension in the royal court was palpable. The grand hall was filled with the whispers of nobles and advisors, their eyes fixed on the throne where Queen Zerethal sat. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes held a glint of something more. Anger, frustration, and perhaps even disappointment. The Queen had expected Jackson to accept her offer without question, to take her daughter's hand as a symbol of strength and unity. But Jackson had surprised her. Now, as the court gathered to witness the aftermath of the challenge, it was clear that things had not gone as planned. Jackson stood at the center of the hall, his body still aching from the battle with the beast. Despite his physical exhaustion, he held his head high, unwavering. He had faced the monster, defeated it, and in doing so, had earned the Queen's respect. But it was not enough. The real challenge had only just begun. Alira stood beside him, her eyes filled with both determination and uncertainty. She had made her choice, and so had Jackson. They had decided that their future was not something to be dictated by politics. It was a decision that would shake the very foundation of the royal court, and the Queen knew it. You both stand here, defying the very rules of the kingdom. Queen Zerethal's voice cut through the silence. My daughter was promised to the one who killed the beast, to the one who proved their worth. And yet, here you are, choosing your own path. You believe you can disregard the laws of this kingdom." Her words echoed in the hall, and a murmur spread through the courtiers. The nobles exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to react. They had all expected Jackson to accept the queen's offer, just as every other warrior had before him. But now, Jackson's defiance threatened to disrupt everything. Jackson stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "I didn't come here to be a pawn in your political game, Your Majesty. I came here to prove that humanity can stand strong, not just in battle, but in our choices. And Alira deserves a choice in her future, too." The queen's eyes narrowed. "You speak of choice, warrior, but you forget. Alira's future is not just hers to decide. This kingdom relies on alliances, on power, on strength. You may have defeated the beast, but that does not mean you can simply choose what happens next." Alira stepped forward, her voice strong and unwavering. "I don't want to be part of an alliance built on force, Mother. I don't want a marriage that's arranged for the sake of politics. I want to choose my future, just as Jackson has chosen his path. We are not slaves to the kingdom's laws." The queen's face softened, but only slightly. "You are my daughter. Your future is tied to this kingdom, to the people. You do not have the luxury of choosing what you want. You are bound by duty." Jackson watched as Alira stood tall, her resolve strengthening with every word. She wasn't backing down. She wasn't going to let her mother's expectations control her life. "The people will follow what we do," Alira said quietly. "And I believe they will follow a path of honor, of choice, of love, not one built on power alone." The silence that followed was deafening. The nobles looked at each other, unsure of what to think. They had always followed the queen's orders without question, but now the future of the kingdom seemed uncertain. Queen Zerethal let out a deep breath, her fingers tapping against the armrest of her throne. She had always been a ruler of power, of control, but now she found herself questioning her own beliefs. She had always believed that power and alliances were the only way to keep her kingdom strong. But perhaps for the first time, she wondered if love and choice might be the true strength. Finally, the queen spoke, her voice quieter but still firm. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps the future of this kingdom does not only depend on power." She paused, her gaze shifting from Jackson to Alira. "But remember, the road you choose will not be easy. There will be consequences." Jackson nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He wasn't naive. He knew that defying the queen would not come without its challenges. But he also knew that the future was worth fighting for, one where choices mattered more than the weight of tradition. The calm after the storm was short-lived. Jackson had expected tension in the royal court, but he hadn't expected what came next. As the days passed, rumors spread like wildfire. The kingdom was divided, and the once solid alliances were starting to crack. Queen Zerethal's decision to let her daughter make her own choice had shaken the entire court. But that wasn't the worst part. A new threat was emerging, one that no one had seen coming. Jackson had been recovering from his injuries when the messenger arrived. The news was grim. An enemy faction, one that had been quietly amassing power for years, had launched a full-scale attack on the outer territories of the kingdom. They were no longer hiding in the shadows. They had declared war. The kingdom's defenses were strong, but Jackson could sense the unease in the air. This enemy wasn't like the others. They were organized, strategic, and ruthless. The rumors spoke of a mysterious leader, one whose identity remained unknown. What Jackson did know was that this leader had a deep hatred for Queen Zerethal and her reign. And now, they were using every resource at their disposal to bring her down. Jackson met with Alira and the queen in a war room filled with maps and military plans. The tension in the room was thick, but the queen's face was unreadable as usual. She had always been a ruler of power, but now she was faced with the reality that her kingdom was under siege. "We've received reports of attacks on the outer cities," the queen said, her voice steady but carrying an edge of concern. "They're hitting us from all sides. I need your help, Jackson. The kingdom needs you." Jackson nodded, his expression serious. "What about your people? What are they doing?" The queen's gaze darkened. "My people, they are scattered. The enemy is too well organized. My soldiers are spread thin, and I can't risk losing any more of them. I need someone I can trust, someone who can lead the fight." Elira spoke up, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "Jackson, we've been through so much together. If we don't act quickly, we could lose everything. This enemy isn't just after the throne. They want to destroy everything we've worked for." Jackson glanced between the two of them, his mind racing. This wasn't just a political game anymore. It wasn't about alliances or marriage. It was about survival. If they didn't act fast, the entire kingdom could fall. "I'll lead the charge," Jackson said, his voice resolute. "But we can't do this alone. We need to unite the people. We need them to fight for what they believe in, because if we don't, this enemy will tear us apart." The queen gave him a sharp nod. "Then we do it together. We unite the people, and we take the fight to them." Jackson turned to Elira, his eyes meeting hers. He could see the worry in her gaze, but there was something else there, too. Trust. She believed in him, and he believed in her. Together, they could face whatever was coming. "We'll need to gather an army," Jackson continued. "I'll start with the cities closest to the border. We need every man, woman, and child who can fight. The enemy might be strong, but we have something they don't. We have unity." Elira stepped forward, her resolve matching his. "Then let's bring the kingdom together. We can't afford to waste any more time." The queen remained silent for a moment, then spoke, her voice carrying a heavy weight. "You're right. We must act quickly. The future of this kingdom rests in your hands, Jackson." Jackson nodded once more, a sense of duty rising within him. This was no longer just about marriage or political games. This was about saving the kingdom, about fighting for a future where freedom and choice could exist. And he was ready to lead that fight. The battle was upon them, and everything had changed. Jackson stood at the front of the gathered army, looking out over the sea of faces. People from all walks of life had joined the fight. Farmers, merchants, soldiers, and even children old enough to hold a weapon. They had come together for one reason: to protect their kingdom from the mysterious enemy that threatened to destroy it. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. It wasn't just the lives of those around him that depended on this victory. It was the future of the kingdom itself. His mind kept returning to the day he had first stepped into the palace, a simple warrior seeking to prove humanity's strength. Now he was leading an army, united not just by duty, but by something far more powerful: belief in a future they could shape together. Behind him, Elira moved through the soldiers, speaking with each one, offering encouragement, a kind word, a look of understanding. She had become more than just a princess. She had become a symbol of hope for the people. They saw her not as a royal figure tied to political games, but as someone who had chosen her own path, just as they were now choosing to stand and fight for their land. Jackson turned to Elira, his eyes meeting hers. There was a moment of quiet understanding between them, a silent promise. No matter what happened, they were in this together. They would fight side by side, not just as allies, but as equals. "Are you ready?" Jackson asked softly, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. Elira nodded, her gaze determined. "I am. We fight for something bigger than ourselves now. We fight for freedom." Jackson smiled, his heart lifting with a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just a battle for the throne. It wasn't about power or alliances. This was a fight for the future, for a world where people had the right to choose their own destiny. The enemy's forces had gathered at the kingdom's border, ready to strike. Their leader, still an unknown figure, had been ruthless in their attacks, but Jackson knew something the enemy didn't. They had underestimated the strength of the people. They had underestimated the power of unity. Jackson addressed the army, his voice ringing out across the field. "We've all come from different places, different lives. But today, we stand together as one. The enemy wants to divide us, to destroy us. But they can't. Not if we stand firm. Not if we believe in what we're fighting for. The crowd erupted into cheers, the sound of it lifting Jackson's spirit. He had earned their trust, and now they were ready to follow him into battle. Alara stood by his side, her hand resting on his shoulder. She looked out at the army, her eyes filled with pride. "We've come a long way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this is only the beginning." Jackson looked at her, his heart full of hope. "Together, we'll make it through. Together, we'll change the future." The final battle was about to begin, but this time, Jackson didn't feel the weight of it on his shoulders alone. He had an army behind him, and more importantly, he had the trust of the people. They weren't fighting just for survival. They were fighting for a future where every person had a voice. As they marched toward the enemy's camp, Jackson knew one thing for sure. This fight wasn't just about winning. It was about creating a new world, a world where the choices of the heart mattered as much as the strength of the blade.